Well, thank you for inviting me. I didn't realize that Dr. Bryan would be on first, and I have everything to say about nitric oxide. Even the quote with Schopenhauer's, which is in my book, Schopenhauer's book, or my quote. So I didn't intend to talk about nitric oxide. I really want to talk about sugar, and nitric oxide is certainly part of that equation. So I go way back, further than Dr. Bryant. So let's go back to 1798, Battle of the Nile. So the Battle of the Nile was a battle between the British and the French. And Napoleon liked to take his savants. He would have taken Dr. Bryant with him. And he had 160-some savants. But the night of the docking of the French fleet, the savants were up on the mountain looking down, and the British found them, and it was about measurement. They didn't know whether it was high tide or low tide. Well, it happened to be they were wrong. So the British fleet with Lord Nelson came in either side of the French fleet at night and blew up the French fleet. The savants on the mountain, in a town called Rashad, I don't know what the French word for what they expressed when they saw that happen, but the entire fleet was destroyed. But they survived. They were there for 3 years. One of the savants that was actually going to go there was a fellow by the name of Lavoisier, who had discovered the science of chemistry. And he actually discovered nitroglycerin, which was the precursor to nitric oxide, 1790s. And he also knew Fourier, who was the father of the science of the measurement of all this stuff, which is half the people here. MedWatch, that's the science behind it. Fourier, the math, 1798. So these people were all gathered in that one spot, 160-some savants. And this is kind of like the similar congregation, because I think there's a lot of companies here that are going to solve this problem. I shouldn't even say going to, they have solved the problem. The measurements, there's a Joshua, and I have his glasses here, which are, I think they're cool glasses too. And if I put them on, I would say, do you see what I see? And he does see things that no one sees because he's measuring the different molecules in the eye. So that's a picture of the poor French as their fleet was destroyed. But ironically, 2 days ago, the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Physics was granted for the discovery of the new Planck time. And why is that important? Because MedWatch is probably in that space, and there are a couple other companies that are in that space that are here, and your company is in that space. And what that means is the Planck space, which really is just zeros and ones. That's what it is. It's information. My field is surgery. Now you would ask, how did I ever get to this point in my surgical field? Well, when I was, this is about 25 years ago, I was trained by Dr. Lee Dellon at Johns Hopkins in the art of, I say, peripheral nerve surgery for diabetic polyneuropathy. Now let's go back to measurement again. This is how we measured diabetes in the 1500s. The physician tasted the urine. That's how he made the diagnosis, because it was sweet. Now we're a little bit more sophisticated today, and that's Lavoisier, and this is Fourier. This is his math. This is what's behind MedWatch. That's what it is. And I took Dr. Dellon's theory of nerve decompression. Now, you have to understand that nerve decompression is a very novel idea, but Dr. Dellon perfected that in 1984 at Johns Hopkins. He taught me about 25 years ago, and he said to me, why do you doctors cut the nerve out of the foot? And I said, well, that's what we were taught, and that's what we were taught. He said, well, I'm going to teach you a different approach, which is treating diabetic polyneuropathy. And what that means is we're decompressing the nerve. Now, Dr. Dellon's a peripheral nerve surgeon at Johns Hopkins. He invented all this stuff, carpal tunnel, ulnar tunnel. And a patient said to him, Dr. Dellon, why don't you fix my legs? And he said, well, that's a different disease. And then he thought about it and went to the lab and discovered the tunnels in the legs, and we decompress the leg tunnel just like we do the wrist. That was 1984. I said to him in 2005, I said, Dr. Dellon, there's more to your theory. I don't understand why no one understands this. So he said, why don't you figure it out? I went to Stanford in 2005 with Dr. John Cook, that Dr. Bryan, I think, knows. And his molecule is asymmetric dimethylarginine. And it's on page 25 of my book. I talked about it because I theorized that nitric oxide is that molecule that can reverse diabetic polyneuropathy. It's the first molecule in the cascade of the compression that sugar causes. That's the cause. Specifically, high fructose corn syrup, that's a whole other lecture, but chemically it causes compression. Now that seems like a novel idea. I've been doing it for 25 years and it's still not well accepted. Well, let me go back to this slide right here. So then I went to Mayo in Rochester, and I wanted to see, and that's why I like can you see what I see? That's amazing. Can you see what I see? And the answer is no, you can't unless you put the lens on. And I did. I put the lens of that microscope, that's me in 2011, looking at, if you can see that little white spot there through the microscope, can you see the nerve? No, you can't, because you have to go through the microscope to see that image on the right. That's the nerve on the rat that I'm operating on right there. And it's very clear to me that it's a nerve compression, but not to you unless you put the lens on. I'm not here to sell anything. I'm here to kind of put medicine and surgery and chemistry and what's going on in this country. And what's going on in this country is a very scary thing. It's the nerve, it's compressed, and it's caused by sugar. So also, by the way, in the Battle of the Nile, the Rosetta Stone was discovered at that place, ironically, in Rashad, Egypt. And that was discovered between Coptic hieroglyphics and Greek. And that was interpreted by a fellow by the name of Champion. He spoke about 15 languages. So here we are today with MedWatch and wearables and new ways to measure things, new ways to put nitric oxide together. I do agree that nitric oxide is that first molecule that causes the nerve compression. Then it's the polyol pathway, which is another molecule, and then it's the Maillard reaction. And all three of those cause nerve compression, not only of the wrist, the elbow, the common peroneal nerve of the leg, but every nerve in the body. We talked about Alzheimer's. My theory, which I call the global compression theory, if this is compression, that nerve also is compression, and that's the olfactory nerve, the sense of smell, the first nerve that is the cascade of Alzheimer's. And it does affect the hippocampus in the brain. And MS, another nerve, vagus nerve. All these nerves, we have labels. It's all the same disease, and it's sugar. It's that simple. And it does reduce nitric oxide through a molecule which I learned at Stanford, asymmetric dimethylarginine. And if you can reverse that, you can reverse these diseases. But most people, by the time they're age 70, they really have the adhesions from the sugar. And my theory in my new book, Unglued, uses stem cells to dissolve those adhesions because it works on anything. And these are just labels we put on disease. So stem cells and exosomes and all that sort of thing, that's what my new book is about. I have a document in 2003, U.S. Senate. John McCain was senator at that time, talking about non-embryonic stem cells, asking these scientists, specifically Joanne Kurtzberg from Duke, What would happen if these kids didn't get stem cells? They would die. What happened when you gave it to them? They're still alive. That was 20 years ago. Autism. Kids that can't speak, stem cells, they're speaking. Kids that can't walk, Jerry's kids, muscular dystrophy, they're walking. So the real question is, how come that science is not front and center? That was 20 years ago. I'm sure if you had a kid who had autism, you wouldn't be too happy. This is curable. It's measurable. It's measurable. Nitric oxide is part of it, and I thank you for allowing me to give my rant. Thank you.